You guys good over there? City manager? You good? Okay, just want to make sure. Okay. We'll call the joint meeting of the Cotati City Council and successor agency to the former Cotati Community Redevelopment Agency open. This is January 28th, 2020 for our regular meeting for the city of Cotati. And can I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Dawson.
Here.
Councilmember Harvey.
Here.
Mayor Skillman.
Here.
Vice Mayor Moore.
Here.
Councilmember Layman.
Here.
Thank you. And then if you can join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. So we'll move on to item 4, approval of minutes and notice of waiving of reading of all resolutions and ordinances introduced and or adopted under the agenda. Move to approve. Okay, a motion and a second.
Second, now that my microphone is now on.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Okay, 5-0 vote. We'll go forward with announcements. Meeting orientation for new attendees and viewers. In conformance with the Brown Act and the adopted City Council rules, the meeting agenda includes items labeled as action items, where the City Council will consider the item and citizens are afforded the opportunity to provide comments relevant to the item being discussed. The meeting agenda also includes a citizens' business item, which is a designated place on the agenda where citizens have the right to say whatever they wish. The City Council may or may not choose to respond to comments as the government code allows. However, if the City Council declines to respond, it should not be perceived as giving credence to or agreeing with any statements that the City Council or its members believe are incorrect, misinformed, or purposely biased. The City of Cotati has special open office hours on Monday evenings from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. by appointment in the Community Development Department at City Hall as part of its Cotati Open for Business program. This program provides personalized assistance and information to developers, current Cotati business owners, and those interested in starting a new business within the city. The Rohnert Park Cotati Regional Library hosts events for all ages, including art exhibits, book clubs, and children's programs. All events are free and open to the public. For more information, call the library at 584-9121 or visit sonomalibrary.org. The Cotati Historical Society Museum is open regularly the second Tuesday of each month from 5 to 7 p.m., Saturdays from 1 to 4 p.m., and by appointment. For more information, call 707-794-0305. Citizens interested in receiving City of Cotati community alerts via text or email are encouraged to sign up at nixle.com or by texting your zip code 94931 to 888-777. Measure G supports police services, a variety of recreation programs for all ages, and the maintenance of our streets, parks, and public buildings. See details on the web at cotaticity.org. Now we'll move on to item 6, which is approval of final agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Thank you, Mayor. No proposed changes.
Okay, thank you. So now we'll move on to citizens' business and public comment for consent calendar items. I'll read a brief introduction. Any member of the public wishing to speak to the council on any items listed on the consent calendar or any matters not listed in the agenda that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council may do so at this time. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the council is not allowed to consider issues or take action on any items not listed on the agenda during this period. Pursuant to City Council Policy 2017-02, comments of any member of the public are normally restricted to a total of 3 minutes in length per person for matters not on the agenda, and a total of 3 minutes per person in length for any and all items on the consent calendar. The mayor may extend the time limit for reasonable time where disability accommodation has been requested. And I do have a few speaker cards. The first is from Jamie Zimmel. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. Come on forward.
Hi, I'm Jamie, and I've been my husband and I and my son have been a resident of Cotati for 19 years. And I wanted to talk today about the animals at Veronda Filati Preserve. I just have heard that the animals are going to be moved away, and since the animals have been here, it's just been such a value to the community. I personally and my husband have gotten so much joy and good feelings by visiting the animals, and we have seen so many people in the community feel the same way, and even visitors from outside of the community have commented and talked with my husband and I about how wonderful it is and so unique to have something like this in the middle of a town. And I recently started volunteering with the animals, helping Nancy feed the animals and that type of thing. And I'm aware that the animals are supposedly going to be moved and then just magically appear back again. And I know that, farming is complicated. I'm not sure what the council has in mind as far as all of a sudden all the animals have to be gone, and then how are they going to, after a construction project, how are they going to just appear again? I'm concerned about that because I don't want to lose this, which I think is just such an amazing thing that we have in Cotati these last several years. So that's pretty much it.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you. And since it's not on the agenda, we can't really address it, but that came up at the last meeting.
Okay.
So if you'd like, we can try to get some information to you specific to what's going on.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. And then I have a card, Mr. Barrich. And you said you wanted public comment and then also wanted on item 10, is that correct? Thank you.
Good evening, Council. For the benefit of the public, my name is George Barrich. I'm a former City Council member. That's what I actually wrote down on the speaker card, but for some reason the mayor just can't bring it to herself to read the speaker card correctly. I don't know what the basis of the resentment is exactly, but we're going to keep trying to do this. At the last City Council meeting, I brought up the fact that, are we using speaker cards? Are we not using speaker cards? Because I filled out a speaker card, and it was not recognized. And the mayor says, well, that's not my procedure. Well, Mayor, you're going to need some procedures. Hopefully we get some procedures from you while you're mayor, not after you're mayor. Now, if you don't accept responsibility of mayor, you're going to make up procedures as you go along. That's not good leadership. So we need to know whether you're going to read the names on the speaker cards or you're not, or you're just going to make them up randomly, arbitrarily, depending on how you feel. If you want the respect of the citizens, you have to earn it. You don't earn it by lying, by swearing on declarations to falsehoods, to making faces at the public when the cameras are not turned on you. I don't come here to be liked. That's not my purpose in life. It's not my mission. I'm not a two-faced politician. I don't speak out of both sides of my mouth. I come here to lead. I come here to educate my city council members. I come here to hold you accountable to your promises and your transgressions. That's what I was taught in college. Now, exposing you folks is one of the most positive things a citizen can do. Despite what Mr. Landman says, it is the very basics of one of the first lessons in civics, high school civics. Recalling officials who've done nothing wrong except shown integrity and leadership, is really your attempt to removing diversity of thought on a city body, leadership body. I think it's one of the dumbest things this city has ever done. Now, if I can sit up there as a city council member and not take a paycheck, then I think you people should too. Remember, sometimes when you try to do the right thing, it doesn't always work out right. So good luck tonight.
And thank you for your comments. I've also got a speaker card. Is it Emil Hugo? Am I even close in the pronunciation?
Good evening, City Council. Emil Hugo is the name. And the purpose of my coming here tonight, it was sort of a segue to a discovery that I was brought to my attention of a project that's being worked on in the city, and it was in the community voice. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? I didn't even know that it made the front page, but it did. And it had some concern about, the city didn't know what was going on, and it could have been a potential hazard to the site. And I actually took a trip up to the paper just to clarify some of those comments in behalf of the city, because I've been working with a lot of the city people here, and we've been working hand in hand on this project, and they're fully aware. But it occurred to me in talking to the paper that not always does the information trickle down, or maybe trickle up, on what's going on. So with that in mind, I thought I'd just give you just a brief update on what is going on, and if you can indulge with my little story here. It goes back, the story started when the general plan was being developed, and I used to sit in these meetings listening to, I think it was Orrin Thiessen, put forward some of his thoughts about the way the general plan could be. So at that time, being in the real estate business, my late brother and I acquired that property on 8150 La Plaza with the intent to create a mixed-use development. Unfortunately, the market died. Commercial isn't really happening in many different areas, and with the help of the community development here, I learned that it was a possibility I could repair what was there as a single-family home. So that is what is going on, but it's just a segment of the project that I'm hoping that it'll evolve with the city's community development's assistance. They sort of coached me into making certain that if it was possible to achieve the bottom floor, which is going to be the second floor. If you've seen the erection of the building there on 8150 La Plaza, so it could be adaptable for commercial. So in effect, it's on its way if it's possible.
Okay, and just so you know, you're at the 3-minute mark, so I just
Oh,
wanted to
I didn't
let
know
you
I had
to
3
run.
minutes. It says here. So with that in mind, I just want to be sure that everybody's aware that this thing is going on, and there's more to happen. We hope to develop the rest of it out in a work-live kind of scenario. So I thank you very much for taking the time, and thank you for all the people who have been working on this. I know I've tried to set up a meeting just to bring you up to speed, but I thought it was a great forum to do it. So
Yeah,
thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for your comments. And I don't have any more speaker cards. Is there anybody else who would like to speak in public comment? Yes, come on up. Are you Kimberly?
Yes.
Okay, you had said about the water bill. and
No,
so
I said it was something on the water bill. That was posted on the water bill?
Oh, I'm sorry. We had an item about water bills
Oh,
on the
my
thing. So I thought-
apologies.
No,
My
that's okay.
apologies. Sorry
Go
about
right
that.
ahead. I'm glad you clarified.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Good evening. I'm also here about the animal farm next door. And just listening to the fact that it was on that someone mentioned at the last meeting that you had. So my question is why isn't it on any agenda for the people to vote kind of what's happening over there? I volunteer over there with my husband. My understanding is that the gentleman who started at Dustin took a job south, so the burden of responsibility with the animals and basically everything falls on Nancy. So she is a person who has not only stepped up for community outreach, in my opinion, but when you look at the kind of the world today with all the bad things that happen in it and neighbors not talking to each other and everybody closes their doors, it has been a complete community outreach, in my opinion. I've met people that I probably would have met because I worked down at the County Office of Education. My husband is a senior manager at Costco, so we give back by providing all the fruits and vegetables that would not normally go to composting, so it's not costing anybody anything. And my understanding is that if they're going to be refurbishing that building, which is fine, why with such a large plot of land they can't move the animals to the side with an electric fence or something like that? So to tell people that the animals are going to be maybe back is kind of not being honest with the public. And I also understand that she got notification within the last day or two that she's got 2 weeks to get these animals out. And as far as I'm concerned, it hasn't gone to vote. A lot of people don't know about it. So I don't understand why it's not taken into consideration what it's really bringing to the community of Cotati. You know, we're not huge Roanoke Park. We're not Santa Rosa. And it's really, really devastating to learn that this might not be a place where any animals are, where people can't come to get to know one another. And it's kind of the circle of things, feeding the animals, they're being sold for food or for pets, and it's a real community outreach. And that's one of the reasons that we moved here, was because it's small, and you do get to know your neighbors. And I pass it every day. Everyone works around here closely, so I don't understand why it's not on the agenda, and why the community of Cotati don't really know what's happening. And someone said, well, did you see it on your water bill that the animals are going to be leaving? And to be honest, I just pay the bill. I mean, I didn't really look at whether it was on mine or a neighbor's, but I think it should be on agenda, and I think that the public needs to know about it. And Nancy, she's the key person. And I met her through volunteering there. It's not like I've known her for years or anything, but seeing what she's done, I really think needs to be taken into consideration.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time. And that's it for speaker cards. Anybody else on public comment? Anybody on consent calendar? Okay, I'll go ahead and I'll close public comment and consent calendar and bring it back to council. Yes. Councilmember Howard.
City Manager, I think it would be helpful to readdress to the public what the plan is for the farm, because even though we've kind of discussed it before and do have a plan for fixing it and what's going to go forward in the long term and all that, I think we have to keep saying it over and over again. So if you could kind of stress that, and maybe we can, come up with some kind of signage while the construction's happening. I don't know, but if you could kind of lay out the plan, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, so the city has entered into a license agreement with Farmster, which is Dustin DiMatteo, and that's who the city has an arrangement with to operate the farm. The city is also currently has out to bid the reconstruction of the farmhouse and the water tower. The bids are supposed to open next week, and that construction will get going in February. So during the construction period, the animals will be moved off the site, but it's a very temporary thing. I think everyone is of the same mind that it's very important to have animals on the property. Whether they're Nancy's animals or someone else's animals, that's up to Farmster, because they're the ones that are licensed to run the farm. But I've made it very clear, as well as the council's made it very clear, that animals are a key part of that farm, and they're going to be important. So it'll only be a temporary hiatus in the animals on the site.
Yes, so just to be clear, it has always been our intention to have that intention has not changed, but we do have to get those buildings fixed up, and we do have to concern ourselves with the safety of the animals that are out there during that time.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to consent. It's not on the agenda, so we talked about it last meeting and then this meeting, and so we're just trying to get information out to the public.
I would, so one thing I'd suggest is if,
Okay, ma'am, we can't, this is just disrupting the meeting at this point, so just, if you can hang on. Excuse me, the city manager is trying to address your concerns, so just hang on.
what I was going to say is I'd suggest if she wants to talk further, I'd be happy to talk with either one of you offline, but you can give your phone number to the clerk, and I can follow up, and we can talk more about it, and hopefully answer any questions you have.
Okay, so we'll move on to item 8, which is the consent calendar items.
I'll make a motion to approve items A, B, and C.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on items A, B, and C. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Okay, so that's a 5-0 vote for the consent calendar. We'll move on to item 9, which is direction on future agenda items. Does anybody have any suggestions this meeting? Not from this side? No? Okay. Okay. Then we'll move on to item 10, which is public hearing, introduction of disposable food serviceware waste model ordinance. And I know we got some written comments as well, which are also on the dais and will be included in the agenda packet.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So this is an item that's coming back to you from in November, or anyway, it's in the staff report. I'll get to it in a minute. But you've heard this before. We had a presentation. The executive director from Zero Waste Sonoma had presented it, and the rough outline of what this proposed ordinance would do is it would ban styrofoam containers and styrofoam products, as well as limit single-use takeout containers. So the idea is to try to use reusable containers to the extent possible, and if that's not possible, then compostable or recyclable containers. So getting back to the start, back in, it was in 2018, the Zero Waste Sonoma, the Sonoma County Waste Management Authority, created a polystyrene waste reduction ordinance, and polystyrene had been identified as not only in Sonoma County, but really statewide and nationally, as a major source of pollution that needed to be curbed, and especially these days when there's many alternative products that are available. There wasn't a need in most cases to use certainly single-use polystyrene. And the proposed ordinance is drafted largely from model ordinances that have been adopted in over 100 such ordinances in California. This particular ordinance was largely modeled after ordinances in the counties of Santa Clara and Santa Cruz. The basic elements are that it would prohibit polystyrene foam serviceware distributed by food establishments, prohibit single-use polystyrene foam products sold by retailers, require food establishments and food providers to provide recyclable or compostable takeout containers, and only provide straws and utensils upon request, and then allow for voluntary or suggest voluntary takeout fees to defray the cost of disposable serviceware and corresponding credits for customers bringing in their own reusable containers. And there was a survey done of people in Sonoma County about what they felt about prohibiting polystyrene. That's in the staff report, but there's overwhelming support to do that. And also in the staff report on packet page 35, there's a list of jurisdictions and the ordinance status. As of now, it's my understanding that Sebastopol and Healdsburg have adopted the ordinance, and many others are on the cusp of hearing or adopting the ordinance. So It was September 24th. That was the date I was searching for earlier. That's when the council had previously heard this as a presentation. And as you all recall, at that meeting, the council had directed staff to work with staff from Zero Waste Sonoma to reach out to Cotati businesses and solicit input on the proposed ordinance, then return to the city council for further discussion and possible action, which is what we're doing tonight. In late 2019, we worked with the Cotati Chamber of Commerce, and they sent an email to all their members soliciting feedback on such an ordinance. And in addition, Zero Waste Sonoma used a list of businesses likely to be affected by this ordinance in one way or the other, and did a direct mailing to them at the end of 2019. The list of businesses that were in that mailing are also included as an attachment to this packet in the staff report. And one last thing, just as a matter of sort of historical context, back in 1989, the city had previously adopted a polystyrene food packaging ordinance. This is in Chapter 8.20, which the copy of that ordinance is also attached in here to the staff report. And that ordinance was more narrowly tailored to prohibit polystyrene on city premises, so for the city wouldn't be purchasing it for its own uses. As you know, it differs from the one that we're talking about tonight, because this would be a community-wide ordinance as opposed to a municipal use ordinance. That's why, in one of the recommendations, we would be repealing Chapter 8.20 and replacing it with a new ordinance, because it's basically taking the place but expanding the scope of it. So you'll also notice in the ordinance that there's a one-year period built in to educate businesses about the appropriate single-use container products. And the phase-in times is in there to allow businesses to use the remaining stock of any existing things that they have, and then begin purchasing alternative products for the transition. And Zero Waste Sonoma would be assisting businesses with this transition. Also attached in the staff report are some educational materials, so what's compostable and recyclable and what's not, and also a list of places where businesses can buy these products. So that was an important part of our discussion in September was, okay, it's great to say we can't use these things anymore, but what are we going to do to help businesses make the transition? And so that's what Zero Waste Sonoma would put together to assist. And it's also on their website, but I included a copy in the packet. I will add, I just glossed over this earlier, but from both the chamber email blast and then the direct mailing by Zero Waste Sonoma, there were, we got two businesses that had responded with some questions. One was Oliver's Market, and they just asked, when are we doing this, so that they can prepare for it. And then the other one was Park Avenue Catering. They were looking for, what are the alternative products, and they apparently found what they were looking for, and they seem to be okay. So that's sort of the outcome of that outreach. And so if this ordinance is adopted, after January 1, 2021, then the ordinance could be enforced. So the ordinance would go into effect in March if it was introduced tonight. But you saw in the text of the ordinance that actually any enforcement on this ordinance would be delayed until January 1, 2021. And like I mentioned earlier, that was intended to give all of our businesses time to kind of make the transition and learn what they can use and what they can't use without any fear of being, subject to enforcement during that period of time. And Zero Waste Sonoma, like I mentioned, would be helping with that. Once we get into 2021, Zero Waste Sonoma would continue to work with businesses through that attached agreement, which is also that model agreement that's in the packet. So they would be doing education and also helping businesses that are struggling. So if there's, and it's all it's intended to be all complaint-based. This is how it works in all the other communities in California, to my knowledge, is, customers go into a business and they, like a restaurant, say, and they're handing out styrofoam clamshells, and then a customer might complain to the city, and then so Zero Waste Sonoma would work with that business and say, hey, you know, that's actually not allowed anymore. You need to move to something different. And here's a list of things you can move to, and here's where you can buy it, right? That's the sort of the intent. As a last resort, if working with them, if the businesses just really just don't want to do it and they just refuse to make any changes, then the code enforcement piece is a possibility. You saw in the ordinance that there's a table of fines if it ever got to that point. That part of it would be handled by the city, the actual code enforcement part, if it got to that point. But Zero Waste Sonoma would handle all the education and sort of encouragement up to that point, is the intent. And then finally, the last thing I will say is that there are some products that there are just no commercially viable alternatives at the moment, and sort of the poster child for that is coffee cups. So single-use coffee cups, we'd encourage people to use reusable, like bring their own mug. I know most of you guys do that, and it's becoming more and more common where people use their own reusable containers. But short of that, for coffee cups right now, that's all they have is the paper cups with the plastic liners, and that can't be composted or recycled. So what businesses can do in those cases is they can apply to the city for a 1-year exemption, and so each year the city would then exempt them from that requirement, assuming that there's a good reason for it. And Zero Waste Sonoma, I'm expecting, would be helping us with that, because we're not experts in the field of composting and recycling, so they would help us truth those requests. And the intent of it being annual is that the technology is always moving. There's always new products coming into the marketplace that could be eventually viable. So for now, though, businesses could get up to a 1 year, and they could ask for it again and again, but it's year by year until hopefully something comes to market that could be used for a takeout container. And that is about it. I will just say that Sloan is in the audience here also. She's from Zero Waste Sonoma, and she'd also be happy to assist with any questions if I don't know the answer. With that, I'd be happy to, we'd be happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And what I liked too about this is that it's going to keep it consistent. So it's not like doing business in Cotati versus doing business in Rohnert Park. Going to have different rules, so that'll be great to keep it the same. So I'll bring it back to council. Are there any comments for? Yes, Councilmember Delasso.
Thank you, Mayor. Who knew that recycling would be so confusing? It's amazing. But, and I'm sure county by county, there's probably different ordinances in place. And as best as we can in Sonoma County, it looked like Petaluma had approved something back in October, but it was slightly different. It wasn't the model. So, hopefully that doesn't sort of throw too many waves into this. And I have some thoughts for later, but what I wanted to say was, kudos to our staff and to Zero Waste Sonoma for getting out there, getting in front of this, talking to the businesses, and kudos to the businesses that are already doing, I guess I'd like to say what they think is the right thing, because again, you don't really know if, what I'm purchasing and stocking up in my business now is really going to be recyclable. So hopefully that will sort of work itself out. And I just remember that the two things I really wanted was that there was a choice of alternatives given to the businesses. So I think I use the term some kind of a catalog, but just something they can go to then order the products they need that meet the spirit of this, as well as the phased-in approach. I think that's important too, because it's silly. Let's say you have styrofoam cups. I know cups are a bad example. It's styrofoam plates, and you've got a stack of 100 of them. Well, it's really bad if you just throw them in the garbage, right? I mean, at least get them used once and then throw them in the garbage, I guess, right? That's going to be the ultimate fate for those things. So Thank you for bringing this back in a relatively quick manner. I really do appreciate the work that you guys put in on this. Thanks.
Thank you. And Councilman Barbie, do you have a comment?
I have a question at this point. So the lists that are in the back, were they meant to be complete? The one thing that kind of stands out for me is that we have Pete's in there, but we don't have Starbucks. And unless Starbucks has another name, which I know some of these big corporations have multi-names, it was unclear to me whether or not we have to do a little bit more outreach or not. So it could be just, I missed it and it's called something else, but that was a question I had. I was a little confused by the dates because it looked like they weren't consistent. It said, in one part it said January 2021 we would enforce, and in another part it said January 2022. And I was unclear as to which date was right. Are we waiting for 2 years or 1 year? So that was not clear to me. It sounds like we are leaning towards the enforcement being done by the city, by code enforcement. I know that when we talked about this in September, it was a little unclear what we wanted to do. So am I correct that that's kind of the direction we're leaning in right now, is that we'll do it through code enforcement when it gets that far?
Yeah, on that question, when it gets to actual code enforcement, basically what would happen is Zero Waste Sonoma would be working with the business all the way up to that point, and at some point when we consult and they have determined like we can't go any farther with this particular business because they're not willing to participate or engage with us on it, then at that point, then the city would have to do the actual code enforcement piece of it. But all the all that work in advance of that would be done by Zero Waste Sonoma.
Okay. And then we had also asked for, as Councilmember DeLasso pointed out, an alternatives list so people, don't have to look it up on their own. There was a quite extensive list of stuff in there. I think that was real helpful. Really good educational material. I think, as you pointed out, this stuff is constantly evolving. So hopefully at some point there will be a solution for the plastic lined cups that right now are a bit of a problem. But I appreciate all the work that was done by the agency and staff to get us this far. I know that, this is new. And I appreciate the Chamber of Commerce and all the businesses working together with everyone so that everyone was on the same page. So I think that helps when everyone can get their questions answered. And I think that it sounds like that went pretty well, especially since we only had really a couple of questions. So.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments for staff? Councilman Lynn?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to confirm exactly what the hardship exemption was at first. In reading this, I thought it might be an extension for businesses that are having difficulty perhaps getting rid of inventory even after a year. Now it sounds more like this is not an extension, but it is an exemption for items where there's not a viable replacement. Is that a better description of what we're doing with the potential one-year hardship exemptions?
So it's my understanding that it's based on not a readily commercially available option for them, as opposed to, I over-order, like a year later they still have stock.
Good. That makes sense. Obviously, we want to have a good balance between being helpful to businesses during a transition. At the same time, you don't want to be in a position where something so weak it allows gaming of the system, because that destroys really the whole benefit, which is to have something unified that businesses everywhere have a level playing field, and the county as a whole reaps the benefit of having this elimination of some of these products. So thank you. That was helpful to hear.
Any questions for staff, Councilmember?
No, I don't have any questions. No, I think it's great that you brought it back in a timely manner. Thank you very much. I think it's a good start, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Did you want to follow up with something?
Yeah, just two questions from earlier. I just would follow up real quick. One is about the effective date. So, in the draft ordinance, assuming it's introduced tonight, it would actually go into effect in March, like mid-March, right? But the enforcement piece of it would go into effect, essentially be effective come January 1, 2021, is how it's written in the ordinance, which is what the reference was. In some of the other packet materials, I think this is and maybe Sloan can help out with this, the presentation from Zero Waste Sonoma said January 1, 2022. But that seems a little far out there. Based on our previous discussions, we had discussed a 1-year sort of phase-in period, not a 2 year. So I assume that was probably just a typo in the presentation. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then the other question about the businesses. So we reached out to, I can't say that we reached every single business, but we reached, certainly, 90-something% of them at least. So I think the feedback we got is representative of what their concerns might be. And when we start, if this moves forward and we start going to the education phase, we'll make sure that if we did miss anybody in this initial outreach, we'll certainly catch them during the educational piece. But it was a pretty broad net that we cast for the initial list.
Okay. So with that, I'll open it up for a public comment. Yes, Mr. Birch.
I want to thank the staff for a very good report. It's been a long 15 years. Been a long 15 years. I look back at a man that had a little more hair back then, but the year was 2004. And I was campaigning door to door, and I had a trifold brochure for my campaign. And one of the promises I wanted to make, and I did make, was to ban the non-recyclable polystyrene food containers and also styrofoam packing material. I didn't win that election that year, but I did come to the city council the following year, and I did bring it up to the city council that I'd like to see them put that on the agenda. They didn't want to put it on the agenda. Sometimes, if it's not your idea, it's not going to make it onto an agenda. And then John Gardino ran for office. I spoke with John about that because I walked door to door for John to defeat Lisa Moore. And he wasn't that interested in that issue as well. He said, I don't think we want to do that. I went before the Coalition to Protect Cotati's Future. They didn't seem to feel that was something they wanted to get behind. But I wanted to see the city set up a couple dumpsters outside to recycle the packing material. In the last 15 years, we don't know how many tons of that material has gone into the landfill. But here we are tonight. And it's very interesting what can happen when people are blinded by their political hate and resentment for ideas that sometimes are not their own, for ideas that are future-looking, that are ahead of their time. But here we are tonight, and I'm not looking for any proclamations to come at the next city council meeting regarding I was the one who pioneered this here in this town. But the fact is that we're here, and it's better late than never. We had a chance 15 years ago to be the leader, to set the pace as one of the cities in the Bay Area, but we just didn't have that kind of support. I don't remember any of you being at those meetings. Maybe Mrs. Harvey was there when I brought it up, or remembers that in my brochure. But it's an interesting issue to see how these issues will come full circle, and oftentimes the solutions come from the minority view.
All right, thank you for your comments. I also have a speaker card from Jenny Bleeker. And we did get your written comments as well. Thank you.
Thanks for the answer. and they're available at Atna Bazaar in Cotati for a very reasonable price, about $10 or something like that. And we always try and remember to take them with us when we go out to restaurants and takeaways and potlucks and things. So I think that's where we should really be heading. I'm sure you'll support the ban, and I hope you'll make it as strong and effective as possible, and also include banning plastic drinking straws if possible, so they're not just optional, but not an option. I do think, I really appreciate the work that you've been doing and that Zero Waste has been doing on this. I went to the Zero Waste Symposium last year, and it was very inspiring. And I do think we do need to have a lot more education about what is and what is not biodegradable and compostable, because most people who really want to do the right thing don't know that you can't put paper cups in, that they won't compost, won't biodegrade, and have to go in the trash. And the same goes for the silver forks, spoons, knives, etc., made of corn and that kind of thing that people think are recyclable or compostable, and they're not. And as I mentioned in the written comments, if anyone's organizing events, I really would suggest getting advice from Green Mary, who does a fantastic job of greening and making big events zero waste. I once went to a breakfast she'd organized for 300 people, and at the end of it there was one metal-lined tea bag. That was the only waste. Everything else was reused, composted. It was fantastic. I'm sure we should be able to do that all the time. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. And that's it for speaker cards. Does anybody else like to speak on this item? All right, seeing none, I'll close public comment and bring it back to the council. Any further comments or questions? Yeah, Councilmember Landman.
Yeah, just very briefly, I'd be very supportive of being in uniformity with this ordinance and following the model we have. I think that's where we get the most benefit out of it. And it seems like the majority so far, at least the cities have done it, most of them have been able to follow that, so I would hope we would. And I think somebody mentioned earlier change in public perception. I think perhaps it was our outgoing mayor mentioned it, that here we are. And I do have to say, it is kind of nice to see we've got to a place now, difficult as this can be for somebody busy running a business to have to make a change in supplies and the way we do things, because we're human beings and we don't like to change our habits, that everybody's got to the point they recognize, no, this has to happen, and there's essentially agreement, and that's the place we need to be. Maybe we should have been there a long time ago, but I'm glad to see we're here now. So very supportive of this, and we'll support it.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Councilmember Harvey, go ahead.
I was just going to move it forward.
Oh, no, well, I did have another question.
No, that's fine.
As I referenced earlier, it's a start. And is there a particular reason why we did not include plastic straws?
So perhaps Sloan can give some more background on this, but the way, as you know, the way the ordinance is written right now is, it's funny. I was thinking about this weekend. I stopped at a restaurant and it is in Santa Rosa, and they had styrofoam clamshells, which I hadn't seen in quite a while, and also they gave you straws without asking for it. And both of those things, talking about the cultural shift, both of those things caught my attention because I just didn't expect a styrofoam and a straw. But the way this ordinance has been developed, and I know there's a lot of background to it at the waste agency, and it went through a lot of stakeholder review, is my understanding. But the way it's drafted is that restaurants would no longer provide straws. You'd have to ask for them. So it would, that one step in itself would be expected to reduce quite a bit of straws that are just sort of involuntarily inserted into drinks now. Yeah, so I don't know if you have anything to add to that in terms of the involuntary, the way it's written is involuntary, you have to request a straw versus just an outright.
Come up to the mic.
Do you want to come up to the microphone just so
Yeah.
that way it's on? That's okay. It's on the record that way.
So, city manager is absolutely right. The idea is that without requesting it, people will not be getting them in the same volumes that they are right now. So really, effectively, that just absolutely minimizes the just sheer number. There would be an exception because this just recently came up with drive-throughs. There's a health and safety concern by not providing the lid and straw on, with that actual driving through because of spills, and the county has said, health and safety supersedes the straw and lid by request. That would be part of the ordinance. That's just where we're at right now, but as far as the straws, by request.
Yeah, so, sorry.
I just wanted
Councilmember Harvey.
to also follow up, to
Yeah,
add to what John has
Thank
asked.
you for the information on there, but when you talk about minimize, you'll have a minimal use of those. Do we know what kind of numbers those are?
I don't have that with me.
Okay, and then we don't have any drive-through food places in Cotati. So that shouldn't be a concern here, so.
Okay.
In my opinion, I think that we should add that to this particular ordinance and give it a little bit more teeth. Because since we don't have any drive-through restaurants in Cotati.
Are you suggesting adding, how would you like to proceed with, like changing the ordinance itself?
Well, if it's a draft ordinance at this point, I would like to suggest that we incorporate that plastic straws into that and have that, 9-month break-in period or whatever it may be.
The only issue there that I have a little bit, like the yellow caution flag has just gone up, is if you've got a business that's in multiple cities within the county, but then it's slightly different, that's going to be a problem, I think, for the business, right? Whereas, so it's almost a moot point for the drive-throughs in Cotati, we get that part. But if you walk into a Starbucks or a Pete's and you want to get an iced coffee or whatever, that would be the point where I'm assuming, they would not be giving you a straw. You would have to ask for it. That's how the model ordinance, I believe, is stating it now. Conceptually, I'm right there where you are. I think it should be stronger, but I think it would have to go countywide to be stronger. And maybe that's some addendum that, should come on to this ordinance. I mean, right now, it looks like there's 3 cities. Cotati would be the 4th out of 9 cities. So I think it's got a ways to go. There's one city that doesn't even have anything scheduled at this point in time. So I would just throw a little caution to the wind on that. I'm just concerned that if it's not the same countywide, it's potentially not so much harder to enforce, because that's done by jurisdiction, but harder to implement for the business. That's my concern.
Well, and to add to that, as of right now, there's not a really good replacement. So a lot of the paper and other materials that some of the other straws are made out of, they're just not there yet. They're not holding up. So that's been some of the issue, is kind of like the paper cups with the plastic lining. It's just not quite there yet. Some places are putting paper straws in, but they won't hold up for, say, a milkshake. You can't have a milkshake and drink it out of it. They just collapse. So there's more work to be done to get there, and I have faith that technology will get itself there. It's just kind of not there right this very second. I suppose it will happen, but...
Through the mayor, a question and a comment on this subject, because I think it's a good one. I'm glad you brought it up. First of all, before we get away from it, I just want to be clear, the county's logic for bypassing this straw and lid ban for drive-throughs is they're worried about spills, so they want to make sure they put a straw in this so you can't spill it. That's a safety issue?
No, that was just something recent. That was a development as part of some outreach and speaking with the different stakeholders that are involved. Prior to that, My understanding is it came through stakeholder meetings, and there was enough pushback that it became this idea of on request only, that satisfied.
No, I thought I'd understood from you that the county was planning to exempt drive-throughs from the straw and lid ban, that they would automatically be given, and I thought you mentioned something that was a concern about safety and that they had viewed on that.
I'll just explain that this came through McDonald's, and they up in Windsor. So this was something
They threatened them with the clown with the big shoes. That's probably good enough. Okay. I just wanted to touch on that because it didn't seem logical to me, but that's the county. I guess it goes back to the whole value of pick something as strong as you can and stick with it and keep it consistent. I mean, I think what I'd suggest at least is I think it would be nice if we had numbers, but we're guessing. But I do agree, I think a very high number. Who really usually asks us for straws? A few of us might occasionally like them with a drink, but will we even think to ask for them? No. I think the one exception might be if you're at one of our fine hamburger establishments in Cotati and perhaps really putting on the calories and have a milkshake as well, you'll want a straw, because and you'll want a real straw, because if you don't, you'll collapse your head trying to drink the thing. But I think for the most part, it'll vanish. But I do agree that's still kind of weak. There's ways around it, like Mr. Delasso just showed us. If you have your straw, my wife has a metal straw, you can do that. I wonder, since this gets most of it out of the way, if we could do this and then ask Zero Waste to come back to all the cities and clean this up and get it with a small modification after this first year. Because that way, hopefully, all of us will be on the same exact plan, and then we can all, hopefully, most of it modify at the same time and pick this extra thing up, too. And that also gives people a little time to get used to it. Mm-hmm. Just a suggestion, because I think it's a good place to go, and I'd like to see it happen. I think this gets rid of most of it. Obviously, there's more to do, and maybe that's where we can get there and still maintain the uniformity of this plan, because I don't want to be like the county, changing it, whether it's for, in my opinion, a weak reason, perhaps, like the county apparently did, or even in this room for a good reason, but then if we have something that's kind of a jigsaw pattern all over, we lose that key benefit of having the same rule for everybody, and all businesses have a level playing field, and which is what we expressed to them we were going to do. So, just a thought.
Okay, yeah, Councilman Delasso.
So just a couple of other comments. And there are alternatives, there are solutions to plastic or even paper straws. This, if you can hear, is actually food-grade metal with some kind of a rubber tip that's bent. Silicone, that's the word I wanted, thank you. So there are alternatives out there. I mean, it's going to cost you money to buy one of these, but I've been using this for over a year, and it's clean because it comes with like a little bottle brush kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So there are alternatives, and it can be done. It's just a matter of taking that extra step. Just a couple of points I wanted to make, though. This is very similar to what came about some 30-plus years ago with reusable bags. People were shocked when they thought they had to go to a market and where's my paper bag? Where's my plastic bag? Even more convenient, right? Because those were like the perfect size for your kitchen garbage cans. And now it's second nature. It's rare, I think, that I see when I go grocery shopping that I see people that don't have reusable bags. They may not have brought enough, but they've got them. So I kind of think that's where we are right now with all of this. And a question I had about new businesses, assuming this is adopted by the City Council this evening, is your presentation to somebody coming in with a new business that's potentially going to use these types of products, is the city now ready or soon to be ready and prepared to say, by the way, we have this ordinance, so if you are coming in and you're some kind of food service business, here's what's allowed, here's what's not allowed. And I just want to make sure that city staff, when they are talking to potential new businesses, that word gets passed on to them. And I'm sure that's the case, but I did want to point that out because I think that's really important. So, I mean, comment-wise, that's just what I wanted to add.
Okay. Anything else? to be added on the site? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Sorry, I keep saying council. I get it. I'll get it eventually. Vice Mayor Moore.
It's okay, John's fine.
Okay.
I think the argument regarding the consistency with businesses, or, you know, if you've got a business like Pete's or Starbucks or Oliver's, they're not going to leave because we said you need paper straws or an alternative to the plastic straws. I don't think that that's going to occur. And I do think that if you look at a business like Amy's, who uses those paper straws and they make milkshakes, they seem to be doing fine. So I really think that it would, if we don't do something now, it's pushed off down the road. I look at an example of when there was a conversation about becoming part of, initiating part of Sonoma Clean Power. And, you know, there was some pushback from some folks that, you know, maybe we're the small city and we shouldn't be doing that. I think this is an opportunity to lead the way and say, look, this can be done, and you've got a year to enforce it and potentially have that effect. And it's not going to be a significant burden, I don't think, for our community and our businesses. And then the other cities might go, okay, well, maybe it's time for all of us to do that. So I think we should take the lead.
Yes, Councilman.
A question for that, because it certainly wouldn't give me heartache if that's the direction we went. But the big concern would be, one of the things I read from the staff report, I'm sure we all did, was a concern about making sure we had uniformity to make sure that it was easy for Zero Waste to manage. Would that small change, even if it's a big change in some of our minds, would that be problematic in any way there? Would that be a substantive enough change that it would make it difficult for you to do what you need to do for us in contract? And I'd like to ask you that as well as staff, if anything comes to mind right away where that would be problematic.
From my perspective, that wouldn't make a huge difference in terms of education, outreach, and ultimately that technical assistance that we'd be providing.
And I should ask, I think our representative from the Waste Management Agency too, I'll ask 3 people. I'd love to hear from all of you, whoever wants to chime in, because that would help inform me.
Well, so I'll repeat this. I've repeated it multiple times. We are heading down a path, which I said was going to happen when we went down this path of model ordinances. The reality is, by having model ordinances rather than having the agency do the ordinance and take care of it, is that each community can take that ordinance as a draft, if you will, and modify it as their city sees fit. So there's nothing wrong with that, but it will mean that our city staff will know what our agency has, and Zero Waste Sonoma will have to start keeping a spreadsheet or a whatever that says, well, in this city you have this, this, and this. In this city you have this, this, and this. And this, you know, if they're going to do that education and outreach, they will have to tweak the educational materials, and they will have to tweak the outreach for each community as they change it. So it's just, I want people to understand that there is a cost associated with that by having non-consistency.
And are we looking at any sort of substantive cost, just to point out that in some communities, because I wouldn't be surprised if other communities followed us if we did this.
That would make it easier.
I can take a look here. I can see about at least three that would probably follow behind us, and a couple that just might not, just yet. But is this something that does, at our best guess right now, and do we think induce a cost? Because I agree, I understand the possibility. I'm not sure if this is big enough to do that.
Councilmember Harvey, thank you for your comments. I do want to say you're absolutely right about just an initial added time that would have to go into modifying some of those outreach materials. However, we're in the business of, diverting waste, and plastic straws, it's a concern. And so if the city of Cotati is ready to move forward on something like that, from where I sit, I think I applaud that, and I think that that's a good move. So kind of, if that is what you would like to do, we will support you in that. I mean, it is your city, and you want to look out for their best interests, and being a pioneer in terms of waste diversion, it's commendable.
So you're not seeing that as something that would perhaps be hugely impactful in terms of cost, either with the changes to the materials?
I don't think so.
And I understand that. I'm just asking you to make a best judgment at this time. Good, thank you.
So I will also just add that I would have to work with Zero Waste Sonoma to find some compostable type products that are usable. I know there's paper straws. I think they're awful, personally. I mean, but I have seen in other places like a bamboo straw, something like that. Something like that would be much more feasible, at least in my mind, because I've used paper straws and I think they're just horrible. Most people hopefully bring the reusable ones, but that's going to be a 10-year process before people get in the sort of mode of bringing steel straws, I think.
So just to comment on the paper straws, there are communities that prohibit plastic straws, including communities that have In-N-Out burgers, which have milkshakes, and they do have a paper straw. It's not the paper straw you're used to. It doesn't work as well as a plastic straw, but it works. It doesn't collapse. So the product is out there, just so you know.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing that we're really worried about, sucking a milkshake through a paper straw. I think the general public is just going to have to kind of figure this out, and we can move forward. And so I'm glad that the Vice Mayor brought that point up. And
but Mr. DeLoss, if we don't stand up for milkshakes, who will?
I don't know how to respond to that one.
So on the milkshake question, I will say that probably the direction most people would go is they would get a lid that you can sip and just not deal with the straw at all. For things, more viscous fluids like milkshakes, you'd want something seriously strong that would, I don't know what kind of paper straws they have in Alameda, but I've never seen a decent paper straw. But yeah, he'll bring paper straws in for a demonstration. And we'll all suck milkshakes through them and see if they work.
Milkshakes next meeting.
So just.
But anyway, I do know that there are alternatives. I have personally used bamboo straws, which I think work just fine. And they don't immediately collapse and dissolve on you. And then of course there's a thing like Councilmember DeLosso had. People remember to bring it.
And then just a procedural question, and maybe this will be from Mr. Bacher as well. Would we need to work with Zero Waste to come up with language to include in the ordinance? Or is that something that we would just, off the top of our heads, include? Or are you looking at a place right now? I don't know.
I was looking at the ordinance to see if there was a change we need to make. On page, I guess it's packet page 97, there's a section number 8.20.060. If you look at subdivision A, it says all food providers utilizing any disposable food serviceware shall use, when available, a compostable product. If you look back at the definition of disposable food serviceware, it includes straws already. So, I think the ordinance already covers it, but if you skip down to D in that section I was just quoting from, it says all food service providers shall only provide straws, lids, cutlery, and to-go condiment packages upon request. It sounds like the intent was to continue to allow plastic straws, but the way it's drafted right now, it would actually, if compostable straws are available, businesses are required to use those. I think we just want to clarify that it covers plastic straws. We could add, make a slight change in subdivision A to say all food providers utilizing any disposable food serviceware, comma, including straws, comma, shall use when such products are commercially available. I think that would cover it and make clear that we're intending to include straws. One thing I would point out is we haven't done any outreach about straws, and the business community might have a concern about it. Since this thing isn't going to be enforced anyway until 2021, you could introduce this ordinance in the current form, do some outreach, and then come back and we can make the change in the future. So that's another option for the council to consider. I didn't talk to Damien about that. I usually try to do that. But,
Well, and like you
it's
said,
another option for you.
So just to be clear on that, that suggestion would be an introduction tonight with some amendments, but then hold it?
No, I was suggesting a completely different alternative, just introduce it in the form that was in the packet, the way it was, the way the outreach was done on it. Introduce it, have it go into effect. It would go into effect, but it would just kind of be on paper only, because we're not going to enforce it. And then at a later date, Damien could do some outreach about the idea of banning paper or plastic straws, and then come back at a future meeting, introducing an ordinance that would prohibit plastic straws. And it would go into effect, the new rules would all go into effect at the same time as the council adopted the
Mayor?
second ordinance.
Mayor, may I ask a question?
Yes.
While council's rolling on that, he's doing really well. Why? Because it seems like the language would allow the ban on straws, kind of as it's written in subsection A there.
That's how I read it, yes.
Right. Well, I mean, that it does, it's a food service item. Couldn't we, if, again, through education, the businesses, will be told it includes the straws, so you can't use those anymore, giving them a year, can't we just grant another exemption in January of 2021 if we find out there's still this glut of plastic straws? I really doubt it, but, isn't that another option where we can kind of give them another, 6 months, 8 months to get through their inventory? Is that not an option available?
I think that option would be available. One thing I want to ask Damien about the outreach is whether, do we specifically tell the business community that plastic straws will continue to be allowed?
So we're having a dialogue here on microphones.
Good.
So it was, the outreach to the business is basically characterized it as you can use plastic straws, but only on request. So it wasn't overt, but that was how it was, basically how the ordinance reads, right? And I think that's how it was understood probably by the people that read it.
But if I were a business and I heard that, I think I would start to back down on large quantity reorders. I mean, if I were in that business and I heard that it's only going to be on request, well, all of a sudden you're cutting way down on my inventory, so I'm going to start to dial that back a little. I can't speak for any business that's thinking like that, because there was 2.5 pages of businesses listed, but I would guess that might be what they're thinking. So maybe maybe we're looking too much into this. I think we need to move it forward. And again, if we find out in January of 2021 that there's another handful of businesses that still have a larger amount or an amount of plastic straws, we could grant them an exemption to get through those. It's just an option.
Madam, through the mayor, if I might question, since we're giving our city council some work to do here tonight, putting you on the hot seat, as it were. So we're introducing this proposed ordinance tonight. It would not be unusual. Would it be problematic for a council to introduce an ordinance and perhaps when it comes back for its final reading to see changes made to it?
Well, if you did make substantive changes at the next meeting, you'd have to start over again. You'd have to introduce
So it would be a
that
third
night
reading.
and then
Okay.
bring it back again.
And then secondly, is there any legally prescribed timeframe that requires us a certain amount of time between introduction of an ordinance and bringing it back for that final meeting?
No, there's not. There's a time, you can't have the final reading sooner than 5 days after it's introduced, but you can bring the final ordinance back at any.
As a typical elected official, I was looking more at dragging my feet rather
Yeah.
than jumping out
You
early.
can drag your feet.
So my thought is I'm kind of in agreement. If we wanted to do this tonight, we could do this. We're only introducing the ordinance. This will give some time for the community to get some output, get some input on this to come back to us if we need. We could, depending on what feedback we get, we could let staff judge when to bring this back for final reading. And if there's something we've missed, if there's some new problem we've created, or if we just need to hear more or there's more time necessary, then we can extend it to a third meeting and be done with it. But I think what will happen is, I suspect, as our outgoing mayor said, we might be reading more into it in an effort to be careful. I suspect it'll probably be workable for our businesses, and it makes sense to get it done all at the same time. So I will say something. We hear from time to time that we all think the same way and vote the same way, and it's funny. I came in here reading this tonight, I felt very strongly that I wanted to follow the model ordinance, because I saw the value in that, and I do. But this is the value of discussion, even if it takes time and is perhaps even boring, is watching paint dry for the audience, is we go over all the options, and it changes votes, because it has changed mine tonight, and I'm supportive of this. So I think that's probably a good thing, and I want to point that out. That's the point of these meetings, and the public input and the discussion. So I'm looking to hear what the public has to say, but if there's something, unless there's something I'm missing, I think the pluses probably outweigh any of the potential negatives and achieve something beneficial. And hopefully sets a high watermark for the rest of our colleagues who are going to follow behind us.
Yes, Councilmember Harvey.
So are you suggesting we do, as was suggested by the city attorney, and make a modification to 08-20-060A?
Yes, as described, I think that would be acceptable.
Shall use including straws, I believe was the terminology that you had suggested. Okay.
I'm sorry. As I understood the suggestion, you would introduce it with that change made, direct the city manager to do some additional outreach to the business community about the fact that the council included straws, specifically included straws, and ask for their feedback. And then once that's done, bring it back to you, and you can make a final decision. At that time, if you wanted to remove that provision, you could strike it, reintroduce the ordinance, and bring it back for final adoption on a later date.
And I would just emphasize the removal of plastic straws.
Yeah.
I just want that word in there, too.
And I might ask, since Zero Waste Sonoma seems very thumbs up in this, they may be able to help the city manager, so it's not one extra job on staff's lap completely. If there's some help with that outreach, I think that could be just great and beneficial for everybody.
So one more thing, just to make sure I'm clear on this. So like on packet page 75 is the outreach materials that Zero Waste Sonoma puts together. So like in the middle of that page, it has a list of things by customer request only, right? So what we're talking about is taking the single-use straws out of this. So we'd have like a Cotati, well, if no one else follows us, we'd have a Cotati version that has no straws, right? But the other things would be by request only, right? Right? That's what we're proposing. Okay.
And it would be single-use plastic straws, because we could have compostable, whatever these dreaded huge ankle-thick paper straws must look like, I don't know, but I would think that met the interests of what we're all trying to do here.
Yeah.
So we're not totally eliminating straws, just plastic straws. Even by request, we're not handing those out.
Right.
But I think you're suggesting changing that page to take the straws off of that page.
Mm-hmm. Right. There would be, yeah, it's implied that, as Councilmember Landman said, it's implied that they're plastic. So
Right.
it would just fall under the general
go, right.
definition of a disposable food service ware. That is,
If you just add compostable in there between single-use and straws, you've got it. Because that way, if you need a straw, or there's some product where you really need that, we can use that. That's good, but we probably don't want to be tossing those out all the time anyhow, if somebody doesn't really want to use them.
All right, Councilmember Moore, Vice Mayor, did it again, John. Vice Mayor Moore.
No, I would be fine with it as amended in that regard.
so the amendments, going back to packet page 97, under 08.20.060, under A, all food providers utilizing any disposable food serviceware shall use, including straw, including straws, shall use when products are commercially available, compostable product, right? So it's including straws after where, before shall. And under Part D there, all food service providers shall only provide lids, cutlery, cutlery, thank you, and to-go condiment packages upon request. So straws would be stricken there as well.
Do we strike straws, or does it become compostable or compostable straws?
Well, I think it gets a little bit more confusing because the things that are on, that they're trying to talk about on, if you look at the page 75, is those are kind of things that ultimately you kind of want to go away. And I don't think you're suggesting that we get rid of compostable straws. We're just allowing them or the straws we're allowing permanently. These things, when there becomes a compostable lid, I'm sure that what we're going to do is, we'll kind of move those off of here too. These are just as a way of temporary, we're allowing these things to happen. So I think it's confusing if you leave straws on there, because we have another solution for straws, just like we have another solution for the clamshells. It's the compostable clamshell.
I think it works either way. I would be satisfied to do it myself.
I just want to make a quick comment about, I think there's two different policy intentions. One is the item A deals with banning straws altogether. You can't use them at all. Item D deals with customers having to request them. So you could prohibit plastic straws and then also not allow businesses to give people paper straws unless they ask for them. So I don't think it's necessary that you delete straws from item D. It's really a policy question for the council to consider. Okay.
Just so long as you don't think that people will think that means plastic straw on D.
Which goes back to why I thought we should just toss it in compostable/paper.
Well, and I think part of that too will be part of the education outreach for the next year.
Get it in writing.
Okay, are we ready for direction from
Yes,
council?
I would like to make a motion on that, if I may.
We already closed public comment, unfortunately, but you want to?
If you want.
Okay, sure. Yeah, we can reopen public comment and then see if anybody else wants to follow up with what we're talking about. So we'll reopen public comment. Come on up.
Sorry, I was doing some research while you guys were talking. Christopher Craigmore. It seems that the state of California banned plastic straws starting in 2019 at sit-down restaurants. So it's the policy's written just like they have it in there, where they can ask for them, but the overall use of plastic straws was banned. Just FYI already. I just don't know how it trickles down to this policy.
Okay. No, thank you for doing that quick research for us. Okay. Any other public comment? All right. I'll close public comment again and bring it back to council.
Well, almost regardless of if there's existing laws that are, county or state, I still think it's fine to emphasize it here so it's clear. I mean, I don't know, from a legal standpoint, I don't think there's a problem with doing that. So I think the direction that we have finally gelled towards, that would be fine to still do.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no further comment, I'd like to introduce the ordinance. The City Council of the City of Cotati introduced a proposed model ordinance as amended, eliminating non-compostable, non-recyclable food serviceware and products containing polystyrene foam, and authorized by motion the city manager to execute an attached form agreement with Sonoma County Waste Management Authority for education and outreach, in a final form approved by the city attorney.
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Can we have
Aye.
further discussion?
Sorry.
No.
Before it's I was going to say it's too late. I wanted to make one more point to Zero Waste Sonoma, but I'll make it aye. I'll make it now that we've all voted.
Okay.
Guys are too dang fast. If you could communicate what transpired here tonight with the other cities, especially the 3 that have already adopted the model ordinance, and maybe they can start the wheels in motion, and then the other ones who haven't done it yet, they can be thinking about this as they bring it forward to their councils.
Okay, so we have any nay votes, any abstentions? Okay, we have an official 5-0 vote in favor, and we'll move on to item 11. I tell you. Okay. So item 11, adoption of amended Sonoma County Public Safety Consortium Joint Powers Agreement. Yay, JPAs. And for that, I think we're turning to City Manager Damien Obid.
Thank you. As you announced, this is what we all love as the SCPSC, the Sonoma County Public Safety Consortium. So this Joint Powers Authority was formed in 2008, and it was the result of several years before that, the Poly Class incident, and as you probably all remember, they was it Richard Allen Davis, I think, was the guy that was ultimately convicted for that crime. He was stopped by sheriff's deputies, but they didn't know that he was wanted in a different jurisdiction in Sonoma County because the communication systems didn't speak to each other back then. So one of the outcomes from that was that, like, we all need to get together and work off the same platform so that when things happen in one jurisdiction, other jurisdictions have access to the information in real time. So from that, after a couple iterations, was born the Sonoma County Public Safety Consortium. And their primary duty is to provide computer-aided dispatch, which is the computer system that dispatchers use to receive calls and dispatch police or fire units. The records management system, which is sort of the database in the back end that holds all the records. And then the mobile data computers. These are the computers that are mounted in police vehicles as well as fire engines, and they're connected via cellular technology. And this has been the focus of the GAPA up until now. Back in September of 2017, there was a strategic planning meeting held with all the members of the GAPA, and there was a general consensus that there was a lot of new technologies coming down the road that were evolving kind of how public safety agencies do their job, and it would be good to have a GAPA that could be forward-looking and not just kind of dealing with the day-to-day sort of issues that the GAPA had been dealing with previously. So fast forward to April 2019, there was a second strategic planning meeting where they, among other things, they decided that that an executive director was needed. So before this, it was just a contracted executive director. This was, the decision was made that really we need to get a real executive director, someone that has ownership in this project and can help not only evolve the agency with new technologies as things become available and they're of mutual interest to the members of the GAPA, but also look to bring in other cities and sort of expand the network within the GAPA. As is mentioned in the staff report, most of the cities and higher education institutions are part of this GAPA. There's 3 cities that are not part currently, but otherwise the rest are. So that was one of the goals, was to get all the cities into the GAPA so that we have a uniform public safety platform across the county. In addition, the GAPA, as it was previously structured, was very cumbersome. So there was a lot of committees. There's committees for everything, and so as a result, the administrator of the GAPA spent his or her time basically managing various committees and not actually having any time to do anything forward-looking. So that was the other sort of major direction that came out of strategic planning. So the GAPA went forward. They hired the executive director. Brett Sackett is his name. He's actually ex-Sonoma County Sheriff. He was the chief for the town of Sonoma until he retired, but he's now a part-time administrator for the GAPA. There's also another person is a part-time staff to him, prior executive director of the agency, but also before that in her working life was the manager for the county sheriff's dispatch center. So two very qualified people that are very knowledgeable in public safety. The new, so once they were hired, they assessed all the different needs of the agencies, and that's how the JPA kind of reached its form that is in this packet today. The basic structure is that, right now, everyone that's a member, so like, for example, when we joined dispatch with Sonoma State University, the city of Cotati took the lead on getting them into the consortium and becoming full members, which required a JPA amendment. It's kind of a big deal. And the changes here would be that as we bring in other entities into the JPA, it's just by resolution of the governing body, so it's more straightforward. It's easier without having to go back to every member and get it amended for every new member that comes in. So it streamlines that to be able to bring in, hopefully, the other cities in Sonoma County. It also protects all of the cities in the county, so they all maintain a seat on the board. The public safety and other sort of affiliate agencies just get rotating seats as alternate directors, but it's all one seat, one vote for each member. So that typical JPA conundrum was solved early, that, look, we're all the same here. That's good. And like I mentioned earlier, the JPA also consolidates a lot of the various committees that were in the prior structure and makes them essentially staff committees to advise the executive director. Previously, they're all, it was all minutia stuff that were individually Brown-acted meetings, and it was very difficult to manage that. So how it's proposed to work now is there would be, they're like technical staff meetings, and they would come up with proposals, and then they'd move up to a policy committee, which is the board of directors, which is representatives. It'd either be the city manager or an appointed alternate from each city, and that would be, of course, Brown Act meeting and available to the public if they were interested in what was going on there. And the other thing it does is it establishes the purchasing authority of the executive director of the administrator. And then lastly, I will say that there's also bylaws attached. These are sort of draft bylaws. They're not for consideration by the city council or any of the councils that are considering this. It's really just for reference so you understand how they would work together generally. And that's something that ultimately would be revised and approved by the board of directors. The plan is to hopefully get this approved by all the various members of the JPA by March 1, which is the date that you see in the draft JPA agreement. And that is kind of it in a nutshell. I'd be happy to answer any questions about it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Yes, Councilmember Lamon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just one quick question. I think the amendments to the JPA all seem fine and logical to me. I just wondered if you could take us through a slightly deeper dive into how the costs play out. You mentioned on packet page 103 in the next to last paragraph under financial considerations, our participation in the JPA costs the city roughly $105,000 per year. I look at, that's almost 9 times what we pay for SCTA and RCVA combined, but then again, I'm also recognizing we're maintaining a communication system and equipment and a record system. At the same time, though, I know that this is maintenance at this point now, other than occasional upgrades. So if you could just give me an idea of how these costs play out, any comparisons to let me know this is not unusual, because it just jumped out. Because now all I'm going to hear from the staff at SCTA, RCPA is they need to charge us all more. So I have to have a comeback for that.
Yeah, so like the chief was saying, so the basic cost structure is, so I'll get to costs and I'll get to how it's allocated. So in terms of costs, the operational, this is as an example, for 2021, the proposed budget is $3.1 million for the JPA. And this is operational costs. And then on top of that, there's also a replacement fund, and the replacement fund costs, the expenditures in 2021 is 1.5 million essentially. And so replacements are, there's a centralized, there's a bunch of centralized data lines, centralized servers that serve all of the members. And then it also includes things like, air cards, the computers in the cars, like the CAD computers at dispatch stations. So like the hardware itself that's in the agencies. So they're all set up and configured and then managed centrally. So there's a replacement piece of it, and then there's an operational piece. And in terms of the allocation, so it's allocated based on the total number of calls for service and iLeads hits. So iLeads is the report writing part of the system. So, for example, every cop, whenever they have some incident, they write a report on it. And I think it also includes other hits, like if you're in your car and you're out responding to a call, you have an iLeads sort of hit on the system. And it's really just sort of I kind of look at it as a surrogate of activity, like how active different agencies are. So that's a combined, iLeads and calls for service. And what they do is, and this JPA has been through various iterations of cost allocation methodologies. This is the one that has been in place for the last couple of years, and it's a 5-year rolling average. So you take 5 years of data and they average it. And then they add up the iLeads hits and the calls for service by agency, and then that's how those total numbers I mentioned earlier get allocated by agency. So 100,000 is certainly not cheap, but that's just how it comes out for us.
Good, okay, well, certainly having a cost that's based on usage is a good grounding for JPA costs. It's nice to see a JPA where you have something that good a foundation to point to, and I appreciate differentiation between the operational costs being roughly 2/3 and the replacements being roughly 1/3. So that's, I think, what I needed to hear. Thank you.
Any questions, Vice Mayor? Okay. Any questions for staff on the site? Yes, Councilmember DeMassa.
Yes, thank you. Do you have any idea as to why there's 4 cities missing? Cloverdale, Sebastopol, Healdsburg, Santa Rosa. Any reason why they're not a part of this?
Yeah, Santa Rosa's in. It's Sebastopol, Cloverdale, and Healdsburg.
Okay, I missed Santa Rosa on the list somehow.
Yeah.
Okay, again.
Yeah, they didn't join.
So I get that. That's pretty clear.
Yeah.
Are they thinking of joining? Do you have any kind of intel on that? I'm just kind of curious, why aren't all the cities on board? Because you have these other, educational entities and the county.
Yeah, they, in the past, like Cloverdale was part of the project when it was first starting, and then they dropped out before it actually formed, before the JPA formed, but they were in the initial part of the formation. Healdsburg had talked about it at some point, but then they didn't. Sebastopol, I don't know.
Yeah,
but
that's all right.
But I mean, it's definitely a goal. I mean, it was definitely a stated goal of the JPA to really get everyone into the same system, so they're not operating with different systems out there.
Right.
That don't talk to each other.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just interesting that they're not. Yeah. Okay. Especially those right on the 101 corridor. But anyway, thank you.
Could be a good job for the new executive officer.
Any questions, Councilmember Barbie? Yes.
So, given that this JPA is, going through, as it stated, a new board structure and staffing model, and a lot of the committees, one that kind of jumps out at me that's being eliminated is Oversight Committee and Management Advisory Group. It strikes me that no approval of items up to $100,000 is a lot. I mean, typically, an executive director has to come before the board for items, in the above the $25,000 range. This just seems like a large number, especially since it's kind of a new structure or an evolving structure, and a lot of the input that maybe the director would have gotten before, that isn't going to happen. So can you speak to that? It just kind of jumped out at me.
Yeah, so on your second question first, on the purchasing authority of the executive director. So this is, looking through the packet, this is in the bylaws, correct? We're talking about, like on packet page 120. Well, this is the amended version, the 123.
103, it talks about.
103.
I think that's the staff report.
The staff, the staff report, yeah.
Yeah, it's in
Yeah,
the
yeah, so where that's described in these documents is in the attached bylaws.
Yeah.
And what it says is the chair of the board of directors and the purchasing agent are authorized. So the intent, I think, there was, honestly, we didn't have a very long discussion about it since the bylaws weren't, they're going to come back to the full board for further discussion and then revision and amendment and potential adoption. But the way it's written right now is the chair of the board of directors and the purchasing agent, which is the executive director, would have to basically co-sign on expenditures. And this is like on packet page, say like 123.
Right.
Yeah. That's how it's written right now. If there's discomfort in that, I do acknowledge that $100,000 is a relatively high threshold for a smaller agency, for sure. I think what they were trying to do to give some level of comfort with that was have the chair of the board of directors also have to co-sign those things. But if that being said, if there's discomfort with that, I'd
Yeah.
be happy to take that back.
I mean, because if you read that whole sentence, it says the chair of the board of directors and the purchasing agent are authorized to sign payment requests and related contracts on behalf of the SCPSC with or without direct board approval,
Right.
if they fall within the budget.
It definitely can be read two different ways.
It can be read two different ways. It almost sounds like either of them can, it doesn't really say that they both must sign. It just kind of says they both have signing authority up to 100,000. That just makes me uncomfortable. And it may not make anyone else uncomfortable, it just makes me uncomfortable.
Mayor, I can maybe help here a little bit. This provision is in the bylaws, so what you're being asked to do tonight is sign on to the JPA, and you could do that and then indicate, send a message to the JPA board or your representative to not approve, to have the bylaws revised, because ultimately the bylaws are going to be adopted by the JPA board. They're their internal rules, not the JPA is the agreement
Correct.
you all sign off on.
Correct. Then, I just think that it's worth a discussion. I don't know that it sounds like there was a discussion about that. That just seems, in comparison to a lot of the JPAs, that seems kind of high to me.
Yeah, I definitely understand the point, and I'd be happy to take that discussion further with them on the bylaws.
Yeah, if it brings any comfort. This kind of mirrors the discussions we started out with, the JPA, Sonoma Clean Power as a JPA initially, of what the signing authority would be for the chair. And that's something that's grown over the years to get rather high too, but if you take a look, although there's certainly some difference in the level of revenues you might be receiving each year, if you look at the size of the things they're purchasing, we're talking in general, large systems of maintenance, big computer packages for multiple cities. There's probably a reason that number's probably more in the ballpark than I think we'd guess just looking at it. Speaking as the guy that asked him why we're paying $100K a year, just wanting to hear that. But I can see that. So we're talking buying for multiple cities. And ultimately, the bylaws will be the business of this board of directors, which I think you're going to have more oversight with an active board of directors, frankly, than just advisory and oversight committees. So I think you're stepping up in terms of true oversight and co-management of that. So, And I do agree, I think we could support this tonight and give direction to our potential representative, who might just be sitting here right in the room, from what I read in this, and ask for him to take a good look at that and make sure that seems appropriate for that organization with the typical purchases they make, and if not, to bring that point forward.
I would be comfortable with that. It just, I want to be sure that the discussion is had by the board, because, oftentimes, especially as you pointed out, these bylaws have been around for a while, but the structure of what's going on has changed. So, oftentimes the two don't necessarily go together, and sometimes you have to review some of that stuff based upon changes in structure.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to bring that discussion back to the board. Yeah. And on your earlier question about the oversight committee, the issue there was that there was a lot of discussion in the formation, in the reformation of the board that we're talking about tonight, about making sure that there's city manager representation in this board as a policy committee. I think historically what had happened is it was getting delegated to other folks, and so people in the oversight or the MAG group, which is below that, or the JOAG, they were shuffling up into different positions, and it just got muddled. And so the intent isn't really to get rid of the sort of the function of it, but to keep that advisory function there, but make it clear who's a board of director and what kind of that you have chiefs, and you have like chief or fire, police or fire chiefs, and you have city managers, so you have a combined group on the board. And then below that you have other, like, lieutenants and other, kind of high-ranking sort of staff within the public safety agencies that can make these sort of advisory oversight kind of recommendations based on yet another layer of advisory groups below them that are technical groups, right? So it goes through several layers, but it just clarifies that, because it was getting, there was so many different committees and not enough people, frankly, to fill them all, that they were getting muddled. So that was the intent.
That's fine.
Any more questions for staff at this point, or are we good? Okay, so I'll open it up to public comment. Does anybody want to comment on this? All right, seeing none, I'll close public comment, and we'll bring it back to the council.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute the amended Sonoma County Public Safety Consortium Joint Powers Agreement. Boy, that's a mouthful.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nay? Any abstention? Okay, we'll show that's a
And
5.
we are covered that the city manager understands bringing the discussion back about that power of purchasing.
Okay.
Wanted to see a nod.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes, I understand. I will bring it back to the board.
Okay, great, thank you. So now we'll move on to item 11B, discontinuation of residential water service policy to comply with SB 998. And for that, I will, I think, turn again to...
I'm Angela tonight.
You
Yes.
are Angela, okay.
All right, so we had talked, we had a presentation at the end of last year about SB 998. So this is a piece of state legislation which went into effect, and it's requiring, as the name implies, a discontinuation of residential water service policy. And basically what this does is it provides additional rules and procedures for residential water service, like when residential water service can be interrupted, and is intended to minimize the number of customers who have their water service interrupted due to their inability to pay. Presumably, this legislation was introduced at the state level because some utilities in the state were cutting off people that couldn't, that didn't make their payment on time, or whatever the case might be. So as we went through drafting this policy, I'll just say before I get into some of the details of it, a lot of the policy elements that are required under this new law are things that we already do or we go beyond anyway, already. I guess there's a community somewhere that doesn't, thus the law. But with that said, the one thing we don't do is we don't provide a policy in Spanish, Chinese, Tagalog, Vietnamese, Korean, and any other language spoken by 10% of the population. So that is one change we have to make. I guess, some urban areas have those demographics, particularly, some of those demographics such as Filipino and Vietnamese. But anyway, that's a standard requirement across the state, regardless of which part of the state you're in. So we'd be translating our policy into all those different languages. And the policy would have to contain payment options for a plan for deferred or reduced payments and alternative payment schedules, formal appeal process for disputing bills, and then, of course, telephone numbers, which we already do most of that already. And the main thing it would do is it would further extend some periods for payment prior to disconnection. We already have a pretty lengthy period. This would make it even longer. There's various noticing requirements, and with respect to alternative payment arrangements, the customer would have to provide certification from a primary care provider and or demonstrate that they're financially unable to pay and that they're willing to enter into a payment arrangement. And in the policy itself, it talks about what that means. So what does unable to pay mean? How do you demonstrate that? And a payment plan would be a 12-month, could be up to, or would be a 12-month repayment plan for outstanding balances for customers that fall into those categories and request it. They would only be able to get into one payment plan at a time. That was a question that came up last time we did the presentation. Would it be like every billing cycle, would there be another payment plan? That's not the case. You'd have a single, if you can't make a payment on a billing cycle, you could go into a payment plan. And then that payment plan would be the only payment plan they could get into until it's paid off. And then they could get into another payment plan, assuming they qualify under one of these criteria. It would allow tenants of multifamily properties, either served by single or single meter systems or collective, meter systems, that they could, if they're, like, let's say you live in an apartment building and your landlord decides they want to stop paying the water bill. Rather than allowing sort of a deadbeat landlord to have everyone get cut off in that complex, the residents in the complex have the option of taking the bill over so that water service is not interrupted. Of course, that creates a situation with the tenants and the landlord to try to recover those costs, but the basic issue here is that water service would continue, and it wouldn't be shut off because of a landlord. And then there would also be reporting requirements. So we'd have to report the annual number of service interruptions for non-payment on the city's website, and we have to report it to the State Water Resources Control Board. So that would take, it'd take a little bit more time, staff time to do that, but we already have, I don't know, 24 things we already report. So it's one more thing. And I don't think it'd be that big of a deal because we could set up our systems to track those. And this policy would have to, under the law, would have to go into effect by February 1 of this year, so it's coming right up here. And there would have to be some additional changes to our ordinances around some elements of it that we'll bring back at a future meeting. And like I mentioned earlier, the main fiscal impact to the city would be that it lengthens the amount of the delinquency period that can go out longer. It also could delay repayment for up to 12 months for some accounts. But that's really it in a nutshell. I'd be happy to get into the details of the policy if you have any questions.
Okay, do you have any questions for staff at this point? Yes. Councilmember DeLasso, you're nodding.
I'm just really confused. So,
Me too.
So let's say somebody requests a 12-month payment plan. So that means by the end of the 12th month, they would have had to pay some previous amount. Okay, so far I'm on board with that. But then in the ongoing 12 months up to that date, they're incurring more costs. So this is where I'm trying to follow like a matrix, and I had lines going all over the place, and I said, I'm just going to ask the question. So I'm just losing it. I get the fact that, if there's people that can't make a payment for whatever reason, it's probably not a continuous thing. It's probably some infrequent blip in their financial scheme. At least that's kind of what I'm hoping. But is there not a scenario where somebody could have a payment plan that goes for 12 months, and by the time they get to the end of that 12 month and they've paid off some previous debt, they've incurred more? Help me.
Yeah, so the way it works, or is proposed to work, is that let's say you have a billing cycle where you can't make the payment or you can't make the full payment or whatever the case might be. So then you can, if you meet one of those criteria to go into a payment plan, then you can contact the city. There's criteria about when they're supposed to contact the city. They're not supposed to wait until they get disconnected or something. You know, they contact the city, and then the city can put them on a payment plan for, say, 12 months. So that payment plan then is set and it's running, right, for 12 months. The next billing cycle comes along and they get another bill. They need to pay that bill. They can't not pay that bill. And
Then why'd they get on the payment plan? This is where I get confused. I'm just getting a little bit confused with this. And I'm not concerned about the amount of income that will still come into the city will be the same. It'll just be scattered. That's probably not too big of a deal. But I'm just really, you can tell I'm really confused by this option here.
yeah, I think it's state legislation. I don't know. I think
That's always
we're dealing with housing issues too. I mean, I don't know.
I understand.
But I think the intent is if someone has an issue 1 month and they can't like come up with it the next month or the next billing cycle, right? It gives them sort of a way to finance that one cycle. But I think the thought behind it is that if you were able to finance every single cycle, then you would essentially kind of continuously be
Right. That was my concern. And I don't know that that's very realistic. And I think what's more realistic is somebody who, in one period of time, can't pay that bill completely off, and so they need some more time. And I'm kind of just hoping that's where it's going to end.
Yeah, so here's a scenario, right? So maybe like someone has a job interruption, right, and they don't have the money in one billing cycle, and so they can finance that out,
Right.
and then presumably by the time the next billing cycle rolls around, they're able to pay that bill, but they still have a little bit more they pay from the prior bill, and they pay it over 12 months. Otherwise, it would be just continuous, and it would be like paying your minimum balance on your credit card, and you'd never
Right.
be out of debt. So I think that's the intent.
Okay.
And that's how it's structured. That's how the state law and that's how the policy is structured.
And that sort of helped me, but it didn't help me. But thank you. I appreciate
right.
it.
Well, and I was thinking of, say, I just picked a random number because it was easily divided by 12. Say you have $60 and you can't pay it that month, then what I'm guessing is that you would take then the next 11 months and you would tack on $6, and then it would get paid off by the time you got to the end of the year, and then you would start back. If that makes any sense. You're spreading out the payments.
The math makes perfect sense.
Well, if you think about it, if you run into a situation where you're temporarily short and can't make a payment, you might be able to pay, under normal times when you get your feedback, you might be able to handle a higher bill than your typical water bill, but you might not be able to handle two at once. For that situation, the idea is you can use this as a tool to smooth that over a period of time. And I bet you don't have to go the full year if you don't need to or want to, but I think it allows that. So that means that, and this is, I think, as you've adroitly pointed out, this is designed for people that are able to do this, but they're just like happens to everybody. There's rough times occasionally, and they get behind, and this is to help them bridge that so then they can continue. It's not designed for ongoing inability to afford. That's a completely separate and more difficult problem. So I hope that helps, because it's confusing, but it seems clear. It's a smoothing tool, like they do with the water agency, with the budget.
Yeah, and maybe I wasn't that clear, but I think that is the intent, is that in month, let's say billing cycle, or month 2, let's say you have a second month, you get another $60 bill, you don't have to then pay $120. You can pay, 60 plus whatever that financed amount is from the prior. And the hope is that makes it more manageable for somebody. The state law does require that we offer them a 12-month period, at least.
For that one.
For that one, yes. So, but as Councilmember Landman had alluded to, the customer could voluntarily just pay it all off the next month if they desired. We know there's no penalty for that, but we would be required to at least allow them 12 months to repay it.
Yes, Councilmember Harvey.
I guess the whole problem that I'm having with this is it's billed as a, don't turn off people's water for their non-ability to pay. And that non-ability to pay, it seems to me, is just not going to be in this short little, oh, I only have this 30 days and I'm not going to be able, I mean, it seems to me that it's likely to be a bigger issue than just this small little $60 bill. I mean, I just feel like the next month, if it's 60 again, that one's going to be a problem too. I just don't think magic will occur. So the whole way this thing is written just seems a little bit odd to me, because I think the intent on the face says we don't want people who can't afford not to have water, yet the way it's described here, it's like, well, we don't want that to happen for just 1 month and we'll let you spread it out for 12 months. So it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and I'm very confused too.
Yeah, well, so one, I'll say that I guess we'll, as the state law goes into effect, we'll kind of see how it works in practice. But definitely, I mean, the intent wasn't to, because even if you can't afford a month, let's say a billing cycle, if you keep on financing every one of them, I mean, it's like a never-ending mountain that keeps on getting bigger. So I don't think that was the intent.
Just declare bankruptcy.
I was looking at the statute, and as I understand it, once you're in a payment program, if you've gone delinquent, you have to pay your current charges within 60 days, or the city can terminate service. So I think that answers the question you had. You can't just keep refinancing your charges as they come due. If you're already in a plan, then you have to pay your bill, or you can have your service terminated.
And you have to pay that bill in full. The current,
the current bill needs to be paid in full,
yes.
or the city can terminate service, but it has to wait 60 days.
Right.
If I may, I think the maximum exposure is going to be 120 days, if they can't pay it. You do the finance plan for the 60 days.
I think that's right, as long as the
they can't.
city stays on top of the,
Right.
because you have 2 60-day periods.
Right.
I think that's right.
So that's the maximum exposure there.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the billing cycle too, but yeah, right.
And then, I'm sorry, if I may, we need to also adopt this by February?
The policy.
I apologize. Before February.
And then did you have any questions? And then the only question I wanted to clarify was, we're also going to be switching to monthly, because then that will be making it less cumbersome than people who are paying, because before we were every other month, correct?
We are currently every other month, yeah. We weren't going to make that, we were probably going to make that change with the ordinance revisions that we come back with, so it wouldn't be, as part of this policy, we wouldn't be making that billing cycle change, but it would follow on shortly. So
Gotcha.
probably in the late spring or summer is when that.
So, okay.
So does that complicate the implementation of this, or does it just make the amount be
No.
bigger?
No, I think
It
you actually
doesn't.
get halved. Your bill gets halved, because now you're getting monthly instead of every 2 months.
Yeah.
No, right, but we're not doing that, which is what you asked. We're not doing that right now. We're going to do that later.
Right.
Correct.
Correct, yeah. I mean, it really just, the main implication of that is that people could have larger delinquent bills because it's a 2-month period instead of a 1 month.
Right.
If this were to be applied in the interim before the actual monthly cycles in place, monthly billing cycles in place.
But to John's point on what our exposure is, until we move to monthly, because we're bi-monthly, that second bill got another 60 days
Yes.
on it too, so it actually is.
Yeah. I mean, from a city
Exactly.
perspective,
Yeah.
it does lengthen the amount of time.
Our exposure.
Yeah, our exposure, yeah.
Okay.
So, but I think that's a very transitional issue. I don't expect it to be a very major thing as we're switching through the spring.
So any more questions, or are we good for the moment? Okay, so I'll go ahead and open it up to public comment. So, yes, Mr. Parrish.
Well, I'm not going to be as politically correct here. This is the dumbest thing I've seen come before the city council in a long time. Now, this does not prohibit you from adopting this and following this state guideline and going one step further. The city can come up with its own financial plan to help in that second or third month. You can develop a fund, a safety fund, an emergency fund. I think you can have your cake and eat it too, in the sense that you can go beyond and do something more creative. There's millions of dollars in the water and sewer fund. You got millions of dollars apparently from Measure G. We have a very small fraction of people who are delinquent on their water bills. I think this is a no-brainer. I think this council can figure out a way to chew gum and walk at the same time here and solve a very old problem. For many, many years going back, we citizens complained that the city was very, very quick to turn off the water for a dumb monthly delinquent bill or 2 months delinquent, shutting off the water to people's homes, with children in the homes, with elderly in the homes. A health and safety issue, turning off water for a measly $100 or $200 bill. It was crazy. It went on for years. And there were a few people who skipped out of town, not paying their water bill. I don't know what the legal procedure is to lien the property. If there's an outstanding water bill, we haven't talked about that. I mean, there's other solutions here, but just the very thought of turning off people's water. I mean, how cruel, how much more cruel can it get? You're smart people. You should be able to get through this, despite the state of California. This is a loving community, and it's been a scar, a stain on this town for so many years, turning off people's water, their lifeblood. Somehow we've swept under the rug. We've left it to the bureaucrats in the other office to do it and get Public Works to turn it off. Boy, it's been shameful, and I want to support you folks in doing better, to step up your game and find a real solution on how we can either finance this ourselves, put together some kind of charity, do a charity drive, so there's a pool of money for people who are suffering like this, who can't pay their water bill.
All right, thank you for your comments. Anybody else on this topic? All right, seeing none, I'll close public comment and bring it back to council.
If there's no further discussion, I'd like to move adoption of a resolution to approve the discontinuation of the residential water service policy.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? Any abstention? Okay, please show that's a 5-0 vote in favor. And we'll move on to item 11C, receiving and filing the Measure G annual report. And for that, I'm also turning to Angela/Damie.
Yes. I'll try to keep my voice a little higher. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. This is the Measure G annual report, as you just said. So this is for fiscal year 18-19, which is the year that we had just finished at the last council meeting. The council had received the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. So that's the prerequisite to the Measure G report, to make sure all the finances from the fiscal year are audited by an independent auditor and closed. And as we talked about with the CAFR, we got a clean opinion, so there was no findings. Everything was basically in audit language. That means everything was properly accounted for, and all the business processes are in place to make sure that things are accounted for the way they should be accounted for. And following the completion of the CAFR, the Measure G Oversight Committee heard the Measure G report. This was on January 16th, so just a couple weeks ago. And I'll just flip through this real quick. It's the highlights of it. So Measure G, as you know, it's for essential city services, including public safety, street, sidewalk, storm drains, park and landscape, public building, recreation. Those are the, I think, broad categories that Measure G funding is used for. I mentioned the audited financial report, which was completed recently and accepted by the council. And just some background information on Measure G. So this is the sales tax breakdown of in Cotati. So statewide sales tax in use is 7.25. There's 1% local Bradley Burns tax that goes to the city. That's part of the blue pie. And then the county add-on, if you look on the right, there's a county add-on taxes. So that's SMART, open space, SCTA, this is roads Measure M, the county library, Measure Y, and parks Measure M. All that adds up to 1%. That's the green wedge there. And then Measure G is the rust-colored wedge. So in fiscal year 18-19, Measure G accounted for $2.6 million. And there's a minor amount that goes to the state for administration of the tax. And that's a quarterly breakdown. So the growth was primarily in food and drugs and restaurants in fiscal year 18-19. So this is a breakdown by type. So in the report that's included in the council packet, it's broken into operations and maintenance as well as improvement projects and equipment. So operations and maintenance is blue. Improvement projects and equipment is green. So generally speaking, the operations and maintenance hovers around 2/3 of the Measure G revenue. That's or 2/3 of the Measure G expenditures, which is the same, and about 1/3 in projects and equipment. So this is another way to look at that same information. This is by program type. So you can see by different color. They're starting at fiscal year 14-15, where it first went into effect, and through 18-19 at the top there. So the majority, as you can see, of by program type goes into public safety, primarily police, and that's the blue part, right? The green bars are street, sidewalk, and storm drain. So street maintenance, street repair. The rust-colored segment of those bars through the years is parks, so enhanced park maintenance and landscape maintenance and streets. And then public building maintenance is the kind of orange, or not orange, the purplish or gray color. And then finally at the very far right there is recreation. So as you can see in fiscal 14-15, recreation didn't exist. That was one of the priorities of the community, and one of the priorities of the council is to bring recreation programming back to the city. So you can see in 15-16, recreation starts up, and it's been growing each fiscal year since then. So it's taking a larger part of the funding. So for fiscal year 18-19, that's the amount that went into that, $784,000 roughly, and it's for ongoing funding of our local police department, replacement of a police vehicle, and also in the public safety category are some safety improvements on the streets. So the three-way traffic stop in La Plaza, that's behind the fire station, to reduce the bypass traffic between Old Red and East Cotati, was also in that category. Streets, sidewalk, and storm drains for fiscal year 18-19, about $835,000. So continued funding for the civil engineer and enhanced traffic signal, street light, and roadway landscape maintenance. The first phase of the L Street street paving and reconstruction project and design of the second phase was included in there. That amounted to about $1.5 million in street work in 18-19. As you know, the street work bumped was even bumped up more in our current fiscal year, 1920, to 2.5 million. And then you add in the other street-related improvements, and it's well over 3 million in this current fiscal year. And this year it was 1.5 for direct street repair work. And for context, I will just, I'll just point out that like the general fund expenditures is around 8 million. So that's as a proportion, that's very large expenditure relative to any city. And then also, it allows us to leverage grants. And so in this case, it was allowing us to leverage this East Cotati Avenue paving project grant as a federal grant. The grant was $675,000, which we also had to put Measure G money into to be able to leverage that grant. This is the road project between the railroad tracks and the city limits in front of Sunflower Park. It was that paving project that happened this last summer. The 5-year street capital plan moved forward, which you all have seen. Design of the School Street pathway on Richardson. Again, that's a CDBG grant, but Measure G allows us to match that and get that funding source and basically bring more dollars into our community. And then a new stormwater, municipal stormwater permit requires some various things that Measure G assisted with, studying trash impacts, which is part of that stormwater permit requirement. Park and landscape for 1819, about $439,000, included ongoing operations, including a full-time maintenance worker in Public Works, and it provided funding to complete the lighting project in La Plaza, as well as Marsh and McGinnis pathways, the School Street Tunnel. Continued funding the Park Master Plan, which you all saw recently, and all this stuff is coming forward, I think, at the next meeting in the consolidated CIP. So you'll see it, see all the different areas put together in one master CIP next meeting, I believe. And then removal of some pine trees at Sunflower that were diseased and unsafe. And then public building funded ongoing building costs. We had to replace our HVAC system here in City Hall, which was failing, and various improvements to public facilities. Recreation for 1819. Again, this funded our recreation manager and facilities coordinator, and also funded seasonal employment for up to 6 part-time staff, camp staff, and counselors for the CIT program. Redesigned, it helped to pay for the redesign of the activity guide, and funded all services and supplies. Essentially, recreation is largely funded from Measure G. And the auditor, like they do every year, they looked at all of the city's finances, including Measure G, and they provided a clean audit, and it was unqualified. So everything was properly accounted for, and all the internal controls are in place to make sure things are properly accounted for. And that's from the CAFR, but it's the Measure G audited statement that verifies the numbers spent by category. And the last thing I'll just point out is in the packet there's a letter from the Measure G Oversight Committee, which basically states that the expenditures met the intent and spirit of Measure G, in their opinion, and they're recommending, or they are forwarding the Measure G report to the council. That's what the action was. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about this.
Okay, thank you. So do we have any questions for staff? Okay, nothing on this side? Anything? Okay, then I'll open it up to public comment. Anybody? Yes, Mr. Barrage.
I think it's timely now to talk about what a failure Measure G has been over the years. Looking back, the gains that have been made over Measure G does not negate the fact how much money the city has lost by not lowering the tax rates that we had talked about when Measure G was first introduced. If you want less of something, like less business activity, less tourism, you're going to raise taxes. That's how you do it. It's all Econ 101. If you want more of something, more tourism, more sales tax dollars, more business investment coming into Cotati, more development, you're going to lower the tax rates and watch what happens. It's a phenomenal multiplying effect that is known all over the world, that Cotati never sunk in. Now, you can praise these numbers all you want, but we're never going to know the amount of revenue this city has lost, the amount of city pride that has been lost. How many people have left Cotati? How many jobs were lost here in Cotati because of higher sales tax rates, higher fees, and so forth? Yeah, you can parade out these numbers, but in reality, look around the town. Look at the undeveloped lots, undeveloped properties. Look at all the developers who have come and gone, who looked at the landscape and thought, no, not with this city council, not with this tax plan. We're close to 10% tax. It's just been a total failure in that regard, because the city failed to look at the basic economic models that are proven, tried, and true through history. And we missed an opportunity. We missed an opportunity to kill Measure G when we had the chance and watch the growth and the prosperity that would have come to Cotati had we had a competitive advantage over some of the other communities, and competitive advantage over the internet and internet sales. So it's sad. It's sad for those of us who are educated in economics and business to see how we failed and how we have twisted the facts and the logic to perpetuate this hoax over the community that this actually has been a good thing for our community.
All right, thank you for your comments. Anybody else want to comment on the Measure G? All right, seeing none, I'll go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the council.
Seeing no further comments, I would make a motion.
Okay.
I will just say, I think it's a receive and file.
Yeah.
Never mind.
So there's no motion needed.
Okay. Well, it is received and filed. Thank you.
I wonder if I might make a quick comment, just very quickly.
Sure.
I just have to say, I do think we should indeed, if not parade at least, I think these numbers should be shared with the community, but they don't really need these numbers to look at. Because actually, everybody that lives here, or just about everybody that lives here, all you have to do is look around for yourself and see that, in fact,
You've had your 3
I'm
minutes.
sorry, I listened in rapt attention when you were speaking. I'd appreciate the same respect from you. Not really, but I'd appreciate it if you could keep yourself under control. So as I just want to say briefly, I think 6 years in gives us a good yardstick to measure, and I think the success is pretty evident, and the benefit's certainly evident. I remember there were a few neighbors, we were concerned, would a small difference, a half a cent, could this make a big difference? I hear nobody, pretty much nobody, talking about it now, but what I do hear is people are happy with the roads, they're happy with the streets, they're happy with the police department being sound and there, they're happy with the parks, they're happy with the rec department, and I think this proves that. So I just wanted to say that and give staff a thumbs up for their work on this, because I see it a little more clearly every single year, and I know the public does too, so I hope you know that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right, thank you. And we'll move on to item 12, the city manager's report. Back to Mr. Obid.
All right. I like to structure these meetings, so I just talk the whole time. Okay, so I wanted to just let everyone know that, and we put it out on social media and various forums, but we received our third straight budget award from both the GFOA, that's the part we all know, but we also just heard that we also got it from the CSMFO, which I'll give you the acronyms. So GFOA is the Government Finance Officer Association. That's the North American Municipal Governmental Association that sets standards for like auditing and so forth. They set the standards for municipal finance. And then CSMFO is the California Society of Municipal Finance Officers. So the California version of the GFOA. And this award just reflects the commitment of the City Council and the staff to meeting the highest principles of governmental budgeting and fiscal transparency. And for the third straight year, Cotati has received this award, which I'll point out was only received by about 1% of cities in North America with a population under 10,000. So it is a big deal if you follow governmental financing at all. In order to receive the budget award, every application is reviewed by a panel of volunteer municipal finance officers, and the city had to satisfy nationally recognized guidelines for municipal budgeting. The guidelines are designed to assess how well the city's budget serves as a policy document, a financial plan, an operations guide, and a communication device. So that's sort of the intent of it. Anyway, so Angela's not here, but just good job for admin services, as well as sort of the policy direction that continues from the council. It's very helpful to be able to be in a position to get these kind of awards. And then, since I'm on the topic of awards, another one that I will let everyone know about tonight is our Explore Cotati, our activity guide, also won an award. So the activity guide was selected by the California Parks and Recreation Society, this is CPRS, as an award of excellence recipient for marketing and communications. The CPRS awards programs recognizing outstanding achievement in the areas of facility design, park planning, marketing and communication, and community improvement and programming through demonstrating the we love acronyms. So the CREAM principles, which stands for Challenge, Resourcefulness, Execution, Accomplishment, and Alignment with the Parks and Recreation Mission. So it's sort of the highest honor for in the Park and Recreations field for activity guides. So I've already congratulated Ashley this afternoon, but I wanted to let everyone know. Moving off of awards, just wanted to also mention that we're doing some special traffic enforcement in the upcoming weeks. This has also been put out on social media recently. Cotati police officers will be focusing on pedestrian safety, citing drivers who do not stop for citizens at crosswalks, and distracted drivers using cell phones will also be part of the focus to make Cotati a safer place to walk and ride bikes. So even though we'll broadcast it far and wide, people will still do it, so there will be no lack of action, I'm sure. And on Saturday, February 22nd, we're hosting our third annual Sweethearts Fairy Tale Dance in the Cotati Room, and that's from 5:30 to 8 p.m. It's a family dance for children and their guardians to dress up and spend the night dancing, taking photos, playing games, making crafts, and enjoying refreshments. So space is limited, so sign up early on that. We also recently started a free yoga class for older adults through the Santa Rosa JC Older Adults Program. This class is ongoing on Tuesdays from 1 to 2:30 in the Cotati Room. You can also sign up for the class through the JC or at the class, and we're excited to continue our partnership to offer more no-cost programming to the community's senior population. This is in addition to the existing free Zumba Gold class that's also in the Cotati Room on Wednesdays from 9:30 to 10:20 in the morning. And just a reminder, the Ronda Flaty Ranch building improvements project is out to bid. They're opening bids this Thursday on that. There's been a lot of interest in the project, so that's good. So we're hopeful that we'll get a good bid on that project. Wayfinding program is scheduled to be out to bid in early February, with awards scheduled for early March. So that's moving along as well. And this would be the first phase of the wayfinding program construction, but it should be a pretty substantial piece. So it'll be good to see that actually finally get out there. And then design has been underway for over a month on the new sewer on William Street and Olaf Street, and also the 2020 street paving project. So the sewer line on William and Olaf is we're expecting to put that out to bid, and then of course that'll come to council. But on that schedule, it would be slated tentatively for late spring for the sewer project to go into construction. And that would be ahead of the summer paving project. So then the 2020 paving, which is doing the ring roads, and some of, West Sierra would follow on the heels of that so that we can get the utility work done before the paving comes through. Just construction sequencing. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Okay, any questions on the city manager's report? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to city council member reports. So go to my left first, Councilmember Landman.
Let's see, I do have one. This kind of came about by accident, so I'll try and keep this brief, but give me a second to set it up. So I had been in conversation with our mutual colleague, Patrick Slater, who's currently the mayor over in Sebastopol, and he was talking about his upcoming council meeting and mentioned they had an item about complaints in their community about noise, increased noise from the airport, and they were going to be writing a letter and delivering to the supervisors. And I mentioned that's something I'm noticing a lot in my neighborhood, my area, from a lot of people personally noticing it, that I had Brown acted with one colleague and they had noticed it in their neighborhood, so I think it's fair to assume that it's at least roughly half our community is impacted by a notable change. And evidently, credit to his supervisor, Supervisor Hopkins, she had heard of this concern and reached out and invited him up to the County of Sonoma, to her offices, to meet with John Stout, who's the airport manager. And Patrick mentioned to her, oh yeah, I heard from Mark Lamb that there might be concerns in Cotati as well too. So she gave me a call at the last minute, or a text actually, and said, we're going to meet in an hour, but if you want to come up and just share what you're hearing in your neighborhood, feel free, which I thought was a very good opportunity. So I went up and I just wanted to share, basically, Mr. Stout was very open, very friendly. He is the airport manager and he's been the architect of the growth there for some years now. Basically, the bottom line might be that they have, from what he told me at least, is there's no real control on their part over the bigger carriers as to what their paths are. They can't impact that, nothing to be done. He mentioned that the bottom line, of course, was that years ago this was part of the county general plan. The CEQA was done, and that's that. So, that door is closed. The one thing he did hold out was that there's the potential to work towards what they call optimal flight paths. Again, means this planes might fly in at a higher altitude as opposed to kind of stepping in like this. So there could be some potential for noise reduction, but this is something evidently that's voluntary somewhat to some degree, and I'm not sure how high a priority. So I just wanted to share this with you so you're aware. I do think ultimately, seeing as I know we have some concerns in this community, I know that Sebastopol does, and I know that I've heard subsequently that Windsor is discussing the same issue. It's probably something that should come in front of us at some point, but rather than ask for it to come right away, I'd probably, if the council concerned, just ask staff to look into what sort of support, what sort of consulting might be appropriate to help answer those questions about what actually can and can't be done, because that's a difficult place. This is not an area of expertise for us typically, certainly as council members and even for our staff. So I'll leave that with staff just to look at and think about, but it might be the type of thing that in the relatively near future, if we don't hear back from the airport that they're working, trying to resolve some noise issues, it might be a good time to push more strongly on that. So I wanted to share that with you because I thought it would be of interest, and I thought it might be interest to some of the neighbors who may or may not be, depending where you're living. You've noticed a huge increase in jet noise the last couple of years, 24 hours a day. So that's my report. I wish it was a little more cheerful, but that's what we have.
Okay. Vice Mayor Moore?
I have nothing to report. I have a REMIF annual board meeting and training Thursday and Friday.
Okay, thank you. So I'll turn to this side. Councilmember Harvey.
So I attended the Zero Waste Sonoma meeting, and we discussed the draft work plan for 2021, and most of that's just relatively operational and the same. But one of the items that the staff's been working on that will be of interest to some folks is they're looking to place another household hazardous waste facility, in particular in the northern part of the county. And so they looked at some different properties and kind of did some research on other places that have gone through this, because basically we've kind of outgrown what we have at Central. And because it's at Central, which is generally in the southern part of the county, we really don't get very much use by the northern end. But unfortunately, in looking at that, it sounds like it would be extremely expensive. And when I talk extremely expensive, it sounds like it's in the neighborhood of $10 to $15 million to do that. They even looked at some where there were existing buildings there that maybe could be repurposed, and even that the remodel costs, they were looking, $8 to $10 million to re-get them the way they need to be. So that's not looking really great at this point. So one of the things that we asked staff to look at and come back with is, is there another way to slice this? They've been real successful with having the roving household hazardous waste events, and do we need to kind of start saving maybe for a facility, but offer more of those to get the use up, because that's a big amount of money. Just in relative terms, it would mean adding $3.60 per ton to our fee that we have. So it would go up to $9 to pay for that. And that's, not something that we, take, lightly. So we're having staff, take a look at that to see if there aren't some more cost-effective ways to kind of get the North County more engaged. But more to come on that, but I thought you'd find that interesting.
All right, thank you. Councilman Veloso.
Thank you very much. Just one issue to talk about, and that was the monthly Ag and Open Space District meeting. The slate for chair, vice chair, and chair pro tem, all three got renewed, so I think this is now the year 4 or 5 that I've been chair of Ag and Open Space Advisory Committee, so that was good. We spent most of the time talking about the stewardship policy and a fee lands strategy. In buying land, when you're paying the fee price, it's significantly more. It's usually, when you're buying conservation easements, it's maybe 35-45% of the value of the land, but you're purchasing typically the development rights, so it's not going to it's going to be that way in perpetuity. So the discussion was, what happens in 2030, one of those years out there when the current measure will end, and assuming it doesn't get renewed, although it's been renewed 2 or 3 times now by the high 70 percentile by Sonoma County residents, chances are, it could still get renewed in the future. But if it doesn't, what happens with all of the lands that's now being held, either those in fee or, the issue with conservation easements is they're in perpetuity. So there's got to be monitoring of easements forever on those parcels. So it's a strategy to work out, where's the money going to come from. And actually things look pretty good. That's not to say that we wouldn't want to see the tax measure pass, because that would be the ultimate, and then we know it's there for sure. But these guys, it's an amazing staff they have up there. I mean, they leverage the money that they have. There was a recent parcel, I can't remember exactly where, somewhere in eastern Santa Rosa, where it was like $4 million was put in by Ag and Open Space, which is, of course, approved by their board of directors, which is the board of supervisors. But they had $5 million in matching money. So they're really, really good at going out, and they've got a great reputation, too, at going out and getting money to do these kinds of projects to secure lands, either for scenic value, recreational value, or agricultural use, continued agricultural use. And that's what I have. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And then I just had a couple things. Attended the League of California Cities training in Sacramento on the 22nd and 24th. I have not collated all of my notes, but I'll put together something just to report out about the general presentations that were done. And of course, we have all of the materials as well if anybody sees anything of interest. Then coming up, actually tomorrow and Thursday, Friday, I believe, I'm going to be volunteering some time with the California Homemakers for their tamale fundraiser. They take over the community kitchen at Frog Song, and orders are quite lengthy for folks who are interested in purchasing them. So it's a good, fun event. So that is all I have to report out. So let's move on to item 14, public comment on non-action agenda items. Yes, Mr. Barrich.
I want to thank Mr. Lamon for sharing that issue regarding the flight path. We hope to hear more about that, so thank you, Mr. Lamon. As far as the future agenda items, I'd like to make a suggestion, but first a little history might be in order. When I was on the city council in 2009, well, before I was on the council, there was a policy that if any city council member wanted to place something on the agenda, he or she could do that. That changed when I got onto the city council. In the 12 months that I was on the city council, not once was I able to put anything on the agenda, thanks to my colleagues on the city council and city manager Diane Thompson, who had her marching orders. But the fact is one of the things I tried to put on the agenda was this ban on non-recyclable polystyrene food utensils and styrofoam packing material. And I couldn't put that on the agenda. I couldn't put term limits on the agenda, yada, yada, it goes on and on. But I think you need a policy that says when you're on the city council, you have a right to put something on the agenda. And if the item fails for discussion, or doesn't go anywhere, that's just the way it is. But when that person represents a segment of the city, that person should have a voice. Last, we had a couple nice ladies come here tonight speaking about the animals over at the fake farm across the street. And I think what needed to be said as shortly and succinctly as possible is that we have no plan for that property. And we had one workshop in this room with Mr. DeLoso and I think Mrs. Harvey, and there was so much discontent and so many unresolved issues, from parking to tourism to whether it was going to be a petting zoo or a real farm with real livestock that was really slaughtered and eaten at one of our chicken queues here at City Hall or whatever we're going to do, that Mr. DeLoso promised us all, don't worry, there's going to be more workshops. You can count on it. And I haven't seen one since. Okay? And I've brought this up before. It's a cruel hoax on the community to keep telling people we got a plan. We don't have a plan. We don't have a budget. We don't know what's going to go on over there. We had a $500,000 fence put around that property that no farmer in his right mind would have built, but that's another issue. But you got to come clean about this fake farm. These people are going to get disillusioned. They're going to talk to people and find out that you guys are making it up as you go along. It's all being decided behind closed doors, and that's not the way this town should be working. We need to get back on track to, yes ma'am, get back on track to these workshops and come to an agreement on what we're really doing.
All right, thank you for your comments. Anybody else wish to comment on non-action agenda items? Yes, sir.
This is pursuant to my La Plaza project. I didn't have time to expand one little phase of this. In the process of developing this lot, which has got one little house that's being developed, we have a vision for what else is going to be there. And one of one of the thoughts that has been rumbling through my mind on this, and people I've polled, well, what could we do with that that would really enhance it for the city? What would it be that would make a mark, that would have a reason for an end destination for people to come to Cotati? Is there anything that we could develop to make that goal happen? So it's been a struggle for me to see how that could come together, and I was just wondering whether or not the city council or the city itself has some data of what the city might like to see, or is there surveys that have been done or could be sent out that says, you know, what does the general public want to see, so that we can design and build something that's in keeping with that kind of mindset. So for me, it's a kind of a win-win. What can we do that brings in tourism or brings in business and it's enhancement to the city? So that's my thought about why I bring this subject back up. So I yield to the folks here to, if you've got some ideas you want to share with me, or I can give my contacts to whoever is the necessary person. Oh, I can do it with you. So I welcome any of your inputs along those lines.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, anybody else on public comment on non-agenda items? All right, seeing none, I'll move close public comment and move on to item number 15. Was there any information received after the agenda was posted? None? Okay, perfect. And then we will adjourn the meeting at 9:46. Thank you so much.